He stood at the edge of the forest, staring at the faint mist rising above the trees. Somewhere deep inside those woods, he had heard, was a waterfall that almost no one had seen. Locals spoke of it in half-whispered stories, a hidden place where the air felt different and the rocks shimmered strangely under sunlight. Some said it was dangerous, that people who went too far into those would sometimes never return. But for him, that only made it more irresistible. The hiker had spent months exploring forgotten trails, chasing waterfalls, and mapping uncharted paths. Yet this one felt different. Every step deeper into the forest felt like crossing into another world, the noise of civilization fading until there was nothing left but the wind, the rush of distant water, and the faint echo of his own heartbeat. After hours of hiking, he heard it, the low, steady roar of water crashing against stone. He followed the sound through a narrow path barely visible between the trees. The air grew colder, wetter. Sunlight slipped through the leaves in broken streaks. The smell of moss and rain filled the air. And then, through the curtain of trees, he saw it, the waterfall. It wasn't grand or tall like the ones people post online. It was hidden, tucked between cliffs like a secret that nature refused to share. The water fell into a deep pool, mist rising like smoke. But something strange caught his eye. Behind the waterfall, a dark gap. A shadow that didn't move. He stepped closer, boots sinking into the wet ground. The closer he got, the more the roar of the water seemed to muffle the world around him. He leaned to the side. It wasn't just a shadow. It was an opening. A cave. No one had mentioned that before. Not in the online hiking forums, not in the maps, not even in the local stories. His heart raced. The entrance was narrow, half covered by the falling water, almost invisible. He hesitated, one hand against the rock. Something about it felt untouched, like the first page of a story no one had dared to read. And then, with one deep breath, he stepped inside. The light behind him vanished as he stepped deeper inside the cave. The sound of the waterfall became a muffled hum, echoing faintly through the stone walls. Cold air pressed against his skin, damp and heavy, carrying the scent of wet earth and minerals. The beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing narrow stone paths glistening with moisture. Droplets fell from the ceiling, landing softly in shallow puddles that mirrored the weak light. He took slow steps, careful not to slip. The ground sloped downward, twisting like the inside of a labyrinth. Strange shapes covered the walls, patterns that looked too precise to be natural. At first, he thought they were cracks, but when he leaned closer, he realized they were carvings. Symbols, maybe letters, carved deep into the stone. He brushed his fingers against one, and the texture felt rough and deliberate. Someone had been here before him. His pulse quickened. He aimed the flashlight higher, following the carvings as they spread further along the walls, leading him deeper into the tunnel. The cave seemed alive with whispers of the past. Every sound, every echo felt heavier. He reached a chamber where the tunnel opened wide. Water trickled down one side of the cave, forming a small stream that disappeared into a crack below. He knelt beside it, touching the surface. The water was icy cold, yet perfectly clear. It reflected the ceiling, which shimmered faintly like quartz. He tilted his light upward, and for the first time, he saw them, crystals, hundreds of them, embedded in the rock, glowing faintly even without the beam. It looked unreal, like the cave itself was breathing light. He stood still, awestruck. This wasn't just a cave. It was a hidden wonder sculpted by time and maybe by human hands. But as he looked closer at the crystals, he noticed something strange again. Some of the crystals weren't natural formations. They were glass, shaped, cut, and placed. They formed patterns, circles within circles, almost like constellations frozen into stone. His curiosity pulled him further. At the far end of the chamber, the carvings on the wall became more complex, spirals, symbols, and a line of unfamiliar script that seemed to wrap around a large stone doorway. The doorway was sealed, but it wasn't made from the same rock as the rest of the cave. It looked like concrete, smooth and deliberate, built to last. He ran his flashlight across the surface. Faded markings were etched into it. Coordinates, maybe, or measurements. He pulled out his notebook, copying them down quickly. When he leaned in closer, he saw a handprint embedded into the cement, small, maybe a woman's. It was pressed deep, frozen in time, surrounded by faint scratches that looked like someone had tried to dig through. A sudden drip landed on his shoulder, pulling him back. He looked up. The ceiling above the door was cracked, water leaking steadily through the fissure. The ground beneath his feet was slick, but he noticed something odd, a thin metal edge poking out from the mud near the base of the doorway. He knelt down and wiped the dirt away. It was a handle. His breath caught. The handle was old, corroded, but still intact. He hesitated, gripping it carefully. The metal was cold and rough against his fingers. With a slow pull, the mechanism creaked, sending vibrations up the wall. A deep grinding noise echoed through the cave, followed by the sound of something heavy shifting behind the door. He stumbled back, watching as the sealed slab moved slightly, not enough to open, but enough to reveal a faint draft of air escaping from within. The smell that came through was different, dry, metallic, and ancient. His flashlight flickered, reflecting off something shiny between the cracks. He leaned closer again, eyes narrowing. It wasn't water. It looked like metal, something polished, something man-made. His mind raced. Why would anyone build a door this deep inside a natural cave? And what could possibly be hidden behind it? The cave was silent again, except for the slow, rhythmic drip of water. He pressed his hand against the cold wall, listening, feeling the faint vibration coming from behind the sealed slab. It wasn't solid. There was space behind it, maybe a chamber. For a long moment, he just stood there in the half-light, the beam of his flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The carvings, the crystals, the sealed door, none of it made sense. But one thing was certain. This wasn't a simple cave anymore. Something was waiting on the other side, and the cave itself seemed to know he was getting close. He took a step back, his breath forming a thin mist in the cold air. The faint vibration coming from behind the sealed wall hadn't stopped. It was steady, like a heartbeat trapped in stone. He ran his fingers along the concrete surface again, feeling the uneven texture where the cracks spread out like veins. Every instinct told him to turn back, but his curiosity was stronger. He had to know what was behind that door. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small hammer. The first strike echoed through the cave like thunder. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the crystals above shimmered faintly with each hit. The door was tougher than he expected. Even the smallest chip took effort. But as he kept going, the cracks widened, spreading across the surface until a thin line of light appeared along the edge. He froze. It wasn't the light of his flashlight. It was coming from inside. He leaned closer, squinting. The glow was faint but steady, golden in color, and it pulsed slightly, as if alive. He felt his heart pounding faster. Taking a deep breath, he gripped the handle again and pulled with all his strength. The rusted mechanism groaned, metal scraping against stone, and with a final snap, the slab shifted enough for him to slip through. A narrow passage lay beyond the doorway. The glow came from the far end, flickering softly like candlelight. The air here was warmer, dry, and carried a faint metallic scent. The walls were smoother, shaped by human hands, not nature. He walked slowly, each step echoing. After a few meters, the passage opened into a vast underground chamber. He stopped, speechless. The light came from dozens of old lamps mounted along the walls, still burning faintly even after all this time. In the center of the chamber stood a massive circular platform made of bronze and steel, covered in gears, levers, and strange mechanisms he couldn't recognize. It looked like a machine, something ancient, yet ahead of its time. He moved closer, brushing away the dust from one of the control panels. Faded words were etched into the metal. Asterisk property of Project Atlas. Asterisk. He whispered the name under his breath. He had never heard of it before. Around the platform were several wooden crates, their corners rotted, but still sealed. He opened one carefully. Inside were small metal cylinders, some filled with strange liquid, others empty but labeled with codes and dates. He looked around, realizing the entire chamber was a forgotten laboratory. Shelves lined the walls, filled with dusty notebooks, broken tools, and scattered blueprints. He picked one up. It was fragile, the paper yellowed, but the writing still clear. The notes were technical, filled with diagrams and equations. He didn't understand all of it, but the sketches showed the same circular device in front of him, connected to what looked like an energy source. As he flipped through the pages, one line caught his eye. Asterisk. If the core remains stable, the system can restart itself. Asterisk. He looked up, eyes widening. The faint hum that had been vibrating through the floor wasn't his imagination. The machine was still running, barely, but alive. He approached the platform again, tracing the intricate lines of metal and glass. There was a compartment in the center, sealed under a glass dome, and inside it, something glowed softly, a crystal, the size of his fist, pulsing with golden light. He could feel the warmth radiating from it. His flashlight flickered slightly, reacting to the energy. His mind raced. Could this be what the carvings and symbols were about? Was the cave built around this machine to hide it? He remembered the carvings outside, the patterns, the circles, the handprint in the cement. They weren't random. They were part of this. The people who built this place didn't just hide a secret. They buried technology that wasn't supposed to exist. He leaned closer to the crystal, mesmerized. The glow seemed to grow brighter, reflecting in his eyes. He reached out slowly, his fingers trembling as they hovered above the glass. The hum deepened, the air vibrating around him. For a split second, he thought he saw movement inside the crystal, tiny threads of light twisting and coiling like veins. Then, the ground shifted. A loud metallic clang echoed through the chamber, followed by a deep, mechanical sound, as if the machine was waking up. He stumbled back, flashlight shaking in his hand. The lamps along the wall flickered, one by one, filling the space with pulsating light. The crystal's glow intensified, flooding the room with a blinding golden hue. He shielded his eyes, his heartbeat racing. Somewhere behind him, gears turned for the first time in decades. Dust fell from the ceiling as the ground rumbled again. He tried to steady himself, gripping the edge of a crate. The sound was deafening now, machines grinding, air hissing, metal creaking. Then, just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. Silence fell over the chamber. The light dimmed, returning to its faint pulse. He stood frozen, breathing heavily. The air smelled different now, cleaner, sharper, charged with energy. Whatever he had touched, whatever he had awakened, wasn't just old machinery. He turned slowly toward the passage he came from, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The cave felt alive now, like it was aware of him. Somewhere in the distance, behind the waterfall, he thought he heard another sound, a voice, faint and distant, echoing through the tunnels. It wasn't possible, but it was there. He took a step toward the exit, but something stopped him. On the far wall, near the machine, new symbols were glowing faintly, symbols that hadn't been there before. And beneath them, written in the same script he'd seen earlier, were fresh words etched into the stone, as if carved by invisible hands. Asterisk, you were never supposed to find this. Asterisk, his flashlight flickered again, the beam trembling across the chamber walls as his hands began to sweat. The words glowed faintly, as if the stone itself had come alive to speak. Asterisk, you were never supposed to find this. Asterisk, his throat went dry. The cave, once silent, now hummed with an energy he could feel under his skin. The machine at the center pulsed softly, its golden crystal casting long shadows that danced across the floor. Every instinct screamed for him to leave, but something deeper, something beyond curiosity, kept him rooted to the spot. He moved closer to the glowing words. They weren't carved by tools. The edges were smooth, almost melted into the rock, still warm to the touch. As he leaned in, the glow pulsed faster, syncing with the rhythmic beat of his heart. It was as if the cave was reading him, responding to his presence. He stepped back, his breathing uneven. "Who built this?" he whispered, his voice swallowed by the cavern. He turned toward the machine again. The soft hum had returned, quieter this time, but steadier, almost alive. He noticed one of the levers had shifted, no longer locked in its original position. Carefully, he reached for it, brushing away decades of dust. A small metallic plate was revealed underneath, engraved with faint words barely visible under the light. Asterisk, reset sequence, manual activation. Asterisk, his pulse spiked. Reset what? The machine. The cave. Or something far bigger. His mind raced with possibilities. Could this have been a government project? A lost experiment? A power source? But then he remembered the carvings in the tunnel. They didn't look like blueprints or technical markings. They looked ancient, like symbols belonging to a civilization that shouldn't have known how to build machines. He circled the platform, inspecting each part. The gears were massive, interlocking, coated in a fine layer of copper dust. Pipes ran along the walls, some cracked, some still intact, and faint traces of steam leaked from one corner of the structure. It was both primitive and advanced, built by someone who understood energy in a way modern science hadn't yet grasped. He found a small control panel embedded in the side of the machine, its buttons arranged in a pattern that mirrored the symbols carved outside the cave. One of them was glowing faintly. He pressed it gently, and a low chime rang out, soft, almost melodic. The glow of the central crystal brightened again, and for a moment, the air itself seemed to vibrate. Suddenly, the faint golden light rippled across the floor, forming thin lines that spread outward like veins. They traced paths along the cave walls, connecting the symbols, lighting them up one by one. The carvings that once looked ancient now pulsed with a strange, synchronized rhythm. He watched, frozen, as the entire chamber seemed to wake up around him. A gust of warm air rushed through the passage, carrying the faint scent of ozone. He heard faint mechanical noises echoing from somewhere deep within the mountain. Gears grinding, metal shifting, something enormous moving beneath his feet. The ground trembled slightly, and small rocks rained down from the ceiling. He stumbled backward, shielding his face from the falling dust. The light grew brighter, bathing everything in a surreal golden haze. Through the glow, he thought he saw movement, shapes flickering within the light, like shadows of people frozen in motion. He blinked, and they were gone. He ran his hand along the metal platform again. The warmth had intensified, and the crystal in the center was pulsing faster now, its glow reflecting in his eyes. He could hear faint whispers, not words, just sounds, like echoes of voices carried on the vibration of the air. He strained to listen, his heart pounding. For a brief second, he could swear one of them said his name. He backed away, panic setting in. His flashlight slipped from his hand and rolled across the ground, the beam spinning wildly before coming to rest on the far wall. That's when he saw it, another handprint, larger this time, pressed deep into the rock near the exit. It was fresh. The edges were still damp, glistening under the light. He froze. Someone else had been here, or was still here. He turned the flashlight toward the tunnel he had come through. The beam illuminated nothing but the empty stone corridor. The sound of dripping water echoed softly in the distance. He waited, listening. Then, faintly, came a single footstep. It wasn't his. His pulse raced. He picked up the flashlight and turned it off, plunging the chamber into the dim golden glow of the machine. Silence filled the space again, heavy and suffocating. He waited, barely breathing. Another sound, this time closer. A faint scuff of a boot on stone. He slowly crouched behind one of the crates, peeking through a gap. The tunnel entrance flickered with movement, a shadow, tall and slow, crossing the light of his forgotten headlamp lying near the door. Someone was there, walking into the chamber. He could see their silhouette now, framed by the glowing lines on the walls. The figure stopped, head tilting slightly, as if listening to the machine. Then, in a low voice that carried easily across the still air, it spoke, "You shouldn't have turned it on." The hiker's chest tightened. He clutched his flashlight, his breath shallow. The figure stepped closer, the light from the crystal reflecting faintly off what looked like a metallic badge on their jacket. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. Whoever this was, they knew what the machine was. And from the way they looked at it, they'd been here before. The stranger's voice echoed through the chamber, low and steady, blending with the hum of the machine. The hiker didn't move. Every sound in the cave felt amplified. The drip of water, the faint buzz of energy, the slow rhythm of his own heartbeat. The figure stepped closer, the outline clearer now under the golden light. A tall man, broad-shouldered, wearing a long, dark coat slick with moisture. His face was shadowed, but his movements were calm, deliberate, as if he knew exactly where he was. The hiker swallowed hard. "Who are you?" His voice cracked against the walls. The man didn't answer immediately. He ran his fingers along the edge of one of the crates, glancing at the glowing lines crawling up the walls. "You shouldn't have been able to open this," he said finally, almost to himself. His tone carried both surprise and disappointment. This place was meant to stay sealed. "I didn't know," the hiker replied, his voice trembling. "I thought it was just a cave. I found the waterfall, and—" The man turned toward him. His eyes caught the faint golden reflection from the crystal, sharp and unreadable. "You found something that wasn't meant to be found." The hiker tightened his grip on the flashlight. "What is this place?" The man exhaled slowly, as if searching for words. "It's a remnant," he said. "A memory of something built and then buried. A mistake too powerful to destroy." He walked toward the machine, his boots leaving faint prints in the wet dust. When he reached the platform, he stopped and rested a gloved hand on one of the bronze panels. They called it Project Atlas. It was supposed to harness natural energy, magnetic fields, geological pressure, even sound waves. A self-sustaining power source. But it became something else. The hiker stepped out from behind the crate, drawn closer despite himself. Something else. The man looked up at the glowing crystal. It started reacting to people, to emotion, to thought. It learned. It adapted. He turned to face him fully now. When they realized it couldn't be controlled, they sealed it away. The people who worked here disappeared. The records were erased. Only the cave remained. The hiker's eyes widened. He looked at the walls, the glowing symbols, the pulsing crystal. So this machine, it's alive. The man's expression didn't change, but his silence was answer enough. The hum deepened, as if the machine understood it was being discussed. The light flickered softly, pulsing in rhythm with their words. Then why did you come back? The hiker asked quietly. The man hesitated. Because someone had to make sure it stayed buried. He looked down at the base of the machine, where the faint metal handle still glistened with moisture. And now, because of you, it's awake again. The hiker stepped closer, guilt and fear twisting in his chest. I didn't mean to start anything. I just wanted to see what was inside. That's how it always starts, the man muttered. Curiosity. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small device, metallic and sleek, no bigger than a remote. Lights flickered across its surface. I can put it back to sleep. But once it's been activated, it remembers. The hiker's stomach turned. Remembers what? The man didn't answer. Instead, he pressed a button on the device. A sharp tone echoed through the chamber, and the crystal at the center of the machine flared. The hum grew louder, vibrating the air. The floor beneath them began to tremble again. The glowing symbols on the walls flared with sudden intensity, the light running like liquid gold through every carving. Stop! The hiker shouted, covering his ears. The noise was overwhelming now, like the cave itself was screaming. The man stood firm, staring at the machine with grim focus. Then, without warning, the light vanished. The hum stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound left was the soft dripping of water. The man lowered his hand, breathing heavily. The device in his grip was smoking faintly. It's done, he said. For now. The hiker stared at the darkened crystal. What happens if it wakes up again? The man looked at him with an expression that carried both pity and exhaustion. If it wakes again, it won't stop until it finds what it's missing. The hiker frowned. Missing? What do you mean? The man didn't reply. Instead, he began walking toward the tunnel, his steps echoing against the stone. At the entrance, he paused and looked back. You should leave this place. Forget you ever found it. The hiker stood frozen as the man disappeared into the darkness beyond the waterfall. The faint sound of rushing water filled the silence again. He turned back to the chamber one last time. The crystal was dark, but deep within it, under layers of glass and stone, he thought he saw a faint flicker, a heartbeat of light, slow and patient. It hadn't gone out. It was waiting. He took a step closer, then stopped. The words on the wall, once glowing brightly, were now barely visible. But as the water dripped and echoed through the chamber, one faint line seemed to shimmer back to life for just a second, as if whispering directly to him. Asterisk, it always begins with one curious soul. Asterisk.